After months and months of emailing clients and trying to get noticed, you wake up with an email from a client with a real job opportunity. Finally! It's a pretty good feeling, right? I bet you're glad you didn't give up. So now what? You've got the skills and you've got the equipment to do the job, but you've never actually been commissioned before. I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know for your first commission. I'm James, an illustration agent, and I help illustrators build their careers. So what do you need to know to do the job? Hopefully the client will give you all the information in the brief, but it's not always the case, so I'm going to give you a checklist of things that you need to ask. I'll just outline what a brief is in case you're not clear. They're your instructions for doing the job, and they'll typically include some or all of these things. Background information on the client, information about this particular project, technical specifications, reference images, a mood board of things the client likes, any kind of page layout that you might need, the schedule, start date, end date, and any key dates in between, a list of deliverables, that's what you'll be sending to the client at the end of the project, the license details, that's what the illustration is going to be used for, how long it's going to be used, and where it's going to be used, the budget, and most importantly, a description of what the client wants you to do. I've got a whole chapter on dealing with client briefs in my book, The Illustrator's Guide. If you want to know more, there's a link in the description. Briefs come in all shapes and sizes. A good art director will send a good brief, but occasionally things get left out or the client doesn't know what you need to know. This is your career. You should make it your responsibility to ask the right questions and get all the information you need to be able to do your best work. A brief could be a simple email or a 50-page presentation. If it's a short brief, you'll almost definitely have to ask some questions. If it's a long brief, there's probably a lot of unnecessary information in there that you'll need to sort through, so you need to know what to look for. Not every project needs a long brief, and not everything I just listed will be necessary for every project. It's a pain in the arse when you get halfway through a job and the client tells you they forgot to give you a crucial piece of information and you have to start over. It's even worse when you get to the end of a project and the client sends you a contract with terms in it you didn't agree to. If you're a beginner, you might feel a bit scared of asking too many questions in case the client thinks you don't know what you're doing. But what's going to be more embarrassing? Asking a lot of questions at the start of a project and doing a great job, or delivering something the client doesn't like because you didn't have all the information you needed. So here's what you need to know to be able to do the job and to be able to give the right price. First, it's technical details. What size do you need to work at? This could be the page size of a magazine, or a specific size for an online article or social media post, or an outdoor poster maybe. Maybe they need to send you a layout file to work with if you've got like an irregular space to fill. Whatever size the client asks you to work at, it's always a good idea to work a little bit bigger. Sometimes plans change, and this will give you and the client some flexibility. If they need a 300 dpi file, work at 400 dpi. The client may also want you to incorporate some specific brand colors, so that's worth asking about. Does the client need to send you any logos, fonts, or color codes that you'll need? If you're working on something like a magazine cover, you can ask them to send a layout of the masthead. That'll include the title, positioning, maybe the subtitle, the price, the barcode, etc. Then you can use that space effectively. What file format does the client need? Is a JPEG okay? Maybe they prefer a TIFF or a PSD or a vector file. If you don't work in vectors, you'll need to let the client know, and you'll need to know what the maximum size the illustration is likely to be printed at and work at that size if possible. If the client does want something like a PSD file, you don't want to send them all your layers. Clients don't need that kind of access to your working files, and we probably don't want to give them that kind of access unless there's a very good reason for it, if it's being sent to an animator, for example. If the client is specifically asking for layered files or vectors, ask them why they need them. Do they really need them? If not, think twice about sending them, because they can potentially do all kinds of things to your work if they have access to your working files, changing the colors, animating the work, or even pulling parts out of the main illustration to decorate the rest of the page. You should be in control of your files. If the client wants to use a few of the stars or leaves or whatever in your image to place around the page, that's not necessarily a problem, but ask what they need and then you send it separately. Then they won't be tempted to take liberties with your files. Sometimes it will be completely justified and fine. They might want layered files so they can integrate the illustration better with the text on the page or something like that. If you ask, you'll at least know what they're planning. I've also seen clients asking for vectors because they have a misunderstanding of what is technically needed for their designers. They might use the word vector interchangeably with other kinds of files and might not really understand what a vector file is. Vector files are really useful when you're working at large scale, or maybe if your work is being animated or used as part of a website design because it's easily resizable and it's a small file size. If a magazine is asking you for vectors, they probably don't really need it. If you're looking for more support in setting up your freelance illustration business, check out this video and join our community of new illustrators. We've got a bunch of artists helping each other out with advice and feedback. There are monthly portfolio challenges and group portfolio reviews too. Next, it's the project details. When's the deadline? Is that enough time for you? If not, ask for a couple of extra days. It's usually not a problem if you ask at the start of a project, not on deadline day. When do they need to see rough drafts? How many rounds of revisions do they need? Does this client like to see more than one rough idea? You might think twice about asking this, because if you ask, they will definitely say yes. The clients that want to see more than one idea will usually tell you. Personally, I think 2 ideas to choose from is fair. Some clients will ask for more, but you shouldn't need to be supplying more than 3 ideas. Remember to factor this into your price too, because it's going to take longer. What is the illustration going to be used for? Is it just for a magazine article, or will it be used for social too? If so, does the client need any different formats delivering? This one might seem obvious, but do you understand the project? If you've got a scientific or a financial article in front of you, it's perfectly understandable that some of it might go over your head. Don't guess. Ask for a bit more guidance on the subject, or ask the art director what they're thinking for the direction of the illustration. It's part of their job to think about that kind of thing, so don't be scared to ask. Where possible, you should be putting your own ideas in there too, of course. Who is the intended audience for the project? Think about the intended reader, or the intended consumer for an advert, or the intended buyer for a bit of packaging, and use that to inform your work. What is the purpose of the illustration? This might not be something you need to ask the client, but you need to think about it. Is it purely decorative, or is the illustration there to help people understand a difficult article? Either way, you'll probably approach it in a different way. Does the client have a mood board or any references they want to share with you? You can ask the client if there's any work in your portfolio that they particularly like the look of, then you can aim in that direction. If they're sending photos for you to reference, let's say it's a portrait, are they rights cleared? Can you copy elements from this photo in your work without infringing on a photographer's copyright? Are there any key points in the article that the client thinks are important to draw attention to? 2 people reading the same article might find 2 completely different important points that they focus on. Ask the client and make sure you're focusing on what they want you to focus on. What's the budget? That's an important one. Do you know the license details? What is it actually going to be used for? That's the usage. Where is it going to be used? Is it exclusive to this particular client? How long is it going to be used for? Without this information, how are you supposed to know if the price is right? Does the client need you to fill in any forms? A lot of clients need you to fill in forms to be registered as a supplier or a vendor, bank details, your address, tax information, etc. It's frustrating when you send your invoice at the end of a project and then the client sends you a load of forms to fill in because that takes ages. Ask at the start and get it over with. What's even more frustrating is when you get the contract at the end of a project, especially when it has unfavorable terms in it. You want to see that contract at the start of the project so you don't get any nasty surprises once you've done the work. Finally, is there anything you need to tell the client? Are you taking any time off during the project? How many feedback rounds do you usually include? Not every client you work with will be experienced at commissioning illustration, so you might need to guide them. A lot of clients will assume that when they pay you for your illustrations, they can do whatever they like with them, but you know that you are licensing your work for a specific purpose. You might need to make that clear. Write up the license terms in an email or a quotation document, and that will state what the work is for, where it can be used, and for how long. If the client has that up front, they can't really change those terms later down the line without paying you to do so. I hope this checklist will come in handy with your first illustration projects. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and you might also like this video, which is all about how you can learn illustration for as close to free as possible. See you next time.